6 years later, the millionaire looked at the 5-year-old boy next to his ex-wife and was shocked. The black Range Rover cut through the winding road that led to Millbrook, Connecticut, reflecting the late afternoon sun in its tinted windows. Anthony Maxwell adjusted his sunglasses and gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. 15 years building an empire in Chicago. And now, at 35, he was forced to return to the city he had sworn he would never set foot in again. The GPS announced that he was only 5 miles from his destination, but every meter he traveled seemed to drag up memories that he had carefully locked away in the back of his mind. The century-old trees that lined the road seemed the same as in his youth, like silent sentinels bearing witness to his reluctant return. Mr. Maxwell, the meeting with the Millbrook Technologies Board has been confirmed for tomorrow at 9 a.m. His assistant's voice echoed through the car's Bluetooth system. Thank you, Rachel. Prepare the acquisition documents and make sure the lawyers are present, he replied dryly, his voice retaining the professional tone that had characterized him in recent years. The truth was that the acquisition of Millbrook Technologies was just an excuse. The real reason for his return lay in the will of his grandmother, Eleanor Maxwell, who died a month ago. As her last will, she had stipulated that Anthony should remain in the city for at least 3 months in order to receive his inheritance, a considerable fortune even by her current standards. The city center appeared on the horizon, practically unchanged. The same central square, the same white church with its imposing steeple, the same old stores with well-preserved facades. It was as if time had stood still, preserving every memory he had tried to forget. Anthony parked in front of the Millbrook Grand Hotel, the only establishment in town that could be considered luxurious. Before he could get out of the car, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Victoria, his fiancée. Darling, don't forget our engagement dinner next month. The guest list needs to be finalized. He put the phone away without answering. Victoria represented everything he had achieved in Chicago. Refinement, status, business connections, a perfect marriage on paper, but one that had lately made him question his choices. The hotel manager greeted him with exaggerated deference, clearly informed about who his new guest was. Anthony was led to the presidential suite, where his suitcases were already waiting for him. From the window, he had a privileged view of the city he once called home. He decided to take a walk around to get a feel for the area. Wearing an impeccable Italian suit that stood out from the casual atmosphere of the city, he strolled down the main street. A few familiar faces watched him curiously, but no one approached him. His closed expression discouraged any attempt to get close. It was when he passed the old Miller's ice cream parlor that his world stopped. Through the window, he saw Jennifer Lawrence, as beautiful as in his most painful memories. Her brown hair still fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her smile, that smile that had haunted him on countless lonely nights, was still the same. But that wasn't what made his heart skip a beat. Next to her, holding her hand, was a boy of about 5. A boy with the same green eyes and determined chin that Anthony saw every morning in the mirror. Time seemed to freeze. Jennifer looked up and saw him. The smile died on her lips, replaced by an expression of shock and something else. Fear. The boy, oblivious to the sudden tension, tugged at his mother's hand, pointing excitedly at the ice cream flavors. Anthony felt his legs go weak. All the walls he had built up over the years, all the coolness he had cultivated, all the control, everything crumbled in an instant. Questions exploded in his mind. Why had she never said anything? How could she hide something so important? Without thinking, she took a step toward the door of the ice cream parlor. Jennifer quickly took the boy in her arms and headed for the back of the store. When Anthony finally entered, they had already disappeared through the staff door. A young employee approached, smiling. "Can I help you, sir?" Anthony looked at the door through which Jennifer had fled, his world spinning in a whirlwind of long-suppressed emotions. "No," he answered automatically. "You can't." He left the ice cream parlor as if in a trance, his mind replaying the image of the boy over and over again. 6 years after leaving Millbrook, he discovered that he hadn't just run away from a broken heart. He had abandoned a son he didn't even know existed. That night, alone in his luxurious suite, Anthony Maxwell, the ruthless CEO who had built an empire from scratch, cried for the first time in years. The 3 months he would have to spend in Millbrook had just taken on a whole new meaning, and he knew that his life would never be the same again. The night dragged on like an eternity for Anthony. Sitting on the balcony of his suite, with an untouched glass of whiskey in front of him, He allowed himself, for the first time in years, to immerse himself in the memories he had worked so hard to suppress. Summer, 2018. The air was filled with the scent of blooming magnolias when he met Jennifer at the municipal library, where she worked as a restorer of old books. He could still see her clearly. She was balanced at the top of a staircase, reaching for a dusty volume, her hair tied carelessly up in a loose bun. "Do you need any help?" he asked, and when she turned around, smiling, something inside him changed forever. His cell phone vibrated, bringing him back to the present. It was Victoria again. "Anthony, darling, that's 2 messages without a reply. Is everything all right?" He slid the phone away, unable to deal with the reality of his engagement at that moment. How could he explain to Victoria that he had just found out he had a son? How to justify that the whole future they had planned together could fall apart? The next morning arrived without him having slept. At 8:45, he was impeccably dressed for the meeting at Millbrook Technologies, but his mind was miles away from the corporate takeover. "Mr. Maxwell," his assistant intercepted him in the hotel lobby. "I've brought the revised documents and—" "Cancel the meeting," he cut in abruptly. "But sir, the shareholders—" "Reschedule it for next week." His voice brooked no rebuttal. Without waiting for an answer, Anthony drove to his grandmother's house, now her estate. The Victorian mansion remained majestic, even if slightly neglected. In the back garden, he met Rose, the housekeeper who had served his family for decades. "I knew you'd come back," said the lady, her wrinkled hands busy with the roses her grandmother loved so much. "Eleanor always said you'd find your way back." "Rose," he hesitated, "I need you to tell me something about Jennifer Lawrence." The housekeeper's expression changed subtly. "Ah, so you know about little Christopher?" The name hit Anthony like a punch. Christopher. His son had a name. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Rose put down her gardening tools, staring at him with a mixture of compassion and reproach. "Your grandmother tried, Anthony. All those calls you never returned. She wanted to tell you." The words hit him like successive waves of guilt. How many times had he ignored Eleanor's attempts to contact him, convinced that they were just attempts to get him to return to the city he resented so much? "Jennifer tried to find you," Rose continued, "in the first few months. But you changed all your contacts. You disappeared completely." The memory of those days assaulted him again. The devastating fight, the harsh words exchanged, his impulsive departure for Chicago. He had blocked Jennifer's number, changed his email address, cut all possible ties. "She was pregnant when I left," he muttered, more to himself than to Rose. "And she didn't know it yet," added the housekeeper. "She found out 2 weeks later. Eleanor helped her throughout her pregnancy. She became a grandmother to Christopher, too." Anthony sat down heavily on the garden bench, his legs no longer supporting the weight of the revelations. His grandmother, ever so wise, had looked after his son when he was too busy building empires. A noise at the fence caught his attention. Christopher was there, peering curiously through the wooden slats. For a moment, their gazes met. The same intense green gowned the same curiosity. "Chris," Jennifer's voice sounded, alarmed, and the boy quickly disappeared. Anthony stood up in an impulse, but Rose held him by the arm. "Give her time, son. You can't just burst into their lives after 6 years." "But he's my son," she protested, her voice breaking. "And for 5 years, he was hers alone. Jennifer raised him alone, built a life, protected that boy from any pain his absence might cause. You're going to have to prove that you deserve a place in their lives." The weight of that truth hit him full force. His phone vibrated again. Victoria, probably worried about his prolonged silence. But how could he worry about a wedding in Chicago when his son was there, just a few houses away, growing up without knowing him? "What should I do, Rose?" The housekeeper smiled softly, returning her attention to the roses. "Start by doing the right thing for the first time in 6 years. Stay, face the past, and above all, be prepared to fight for the right to be that boy's father." Anthony stood where Christopher had been moments before, feeling the weight of every wrong decision he had made. His carefully planned life in Chicago now seemed like a house of cards about to collapse. And surprisingly, this prospect didn't frighten him as much as it should have. For the first time in 6 years, Anthony Maxwell knew exactly where he needed to be. The next morning brought with it a renewed determination. Anthony woke up before sunrise and, wearing running clothes, something he hadn't done for years, decided to walk the streets of Millbrook. He needed to think, and movement had always helped him clear his mind. His steps took him unconsciously to Maple Street, where Jennifer lived. The modest, two-story Victorian house, painted in a soft shade of blue, was silent at that hour. A red children's bicycle lay on the front lawn, along with a few scattered toys, unmistakable signs of Christopher's presence. Looking for something, Mr. Maxwell? The deep voice surprised him. Daniel Cooper, the former police chief and Jennifer's father, was standing on his porch, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. His eyes, once always friendly, now conveyed a calculated coldness. "Daniel, Chief Cooper to you," cut in the older man. "You lost that right a long time ago." Anthony swallowed. Daniel had been like a father to him during his years with Jennifer. Now, the resentment in his voice was palpable. "I need to talk to her." "No, you don't," Daniel replied, walking down the porch steps. "What you need is to go back to your life in Chicago and leave my daughter and grandson alone." "He's my son, too," Daniel laughed humorlessly. "Son? A father doesn't abandon his family, Maxwell. A father doesn't disappear for 6 years without a trace." "I didn't know," Anthony exploded, his voice echoing through the silent street. "How could I know if no one told me?" "Keep your voice down," Daniel hissed, glancing worriedly towards Jennifer's house. "Come with me." They walked in silence to the small cafe on the corner, which had just opened. The smell of fresh bread and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. "Do you know why Jennifer was never able to tell you?" Daniel began, after they had sat down at a far table. "Because that last night, you said something that completely destroyed her." Anthony frowned, trying to remember. "I don't want children. I never did. This small town, this quiet life, it all suffocates me. I need more. I deserve more." Daniel quoted, word for word. "That's what you shouted before you left." The memory hit Anthony like a slap. The argument had been brutal, born out of his frustration at Jennifer's refusal to move to Chicago with him. "I was angry," he muttered, more to himself than to Daniel. "And she was pregnant, without knowing it. When she found out 2 weeks later, how could she tell you? You'd made your feelings about children and small-town life very clear." Anthony felt the weight of his guilt increase exponentially. "But she could have tried." "She tried," Daniel interrupted him. "She called dozens of times, sent emails, letters. Everything came back. You had surrounded yourself with so many walls that you became unreachable." The silence that followed was deafening. Through the cafe window, Anthony watched the city slowly awaken. "Christopher," he began hesitantly. "What's he like?" Something softened in Daniel's gaze. "Bright, curious. He has his intelligence and his mother's gentle heart. He loves books like Jennifer, but he's also fascinated by business. Last week, he set up a lemonade stand and created a loyalty system for his customers." Anthony couldn't help but smile proudly. Does he ask about me?" "Jennifer told me that your father was a businessman who traveled the world. She didn't want him to feel abandoned. She preferred to create a story that would protect him from pain." "I need to fix this," Anthony declared, his voice firm. "I need to be part of his life." "What about his fiancée in Chicago?" Daniel asked, surprising Anthony. "Yes, news travels fast in Millbrook. How does she fit into those plans?" Before he could answer, his phone vibrated. It was Victoria again. "Anthony, I've booked a flight to Millbrook. I'm arriving tomorrow. We need to resolve this situation together." Panic settled in his chest. Two worlds that should never meet were about to collide. "You've got a lot to sort out, Maxwell," Daniel said, standing up. "But I'll tell you one thing. If you hurt Jennifer or Christopher again, there's no place in this world where you can hide from me." Anthony stayed in the cafe long after Daniel had left, watching the city come to life. Through the window, he saw Jennifer and Christopher passing by on their way to school. The boy was jumping around happily, holding his mother's hand, telling her something that made her laugh. Her heart squeezed. In less than 24 hours, Victoria would be there, bringing with her all the complications of her life in Chicago. But looking at his son, Anthony knew that some choices had already been made, even if he still didn't have the courage to admit it. He picked up his phone and, for the first time in days, replied to Victoria's message. "Don't come. There's something I need to tell you, and I need to do it in person when I get back." The reply was immediate. "What are you talking about? What's going on?" Anthony watched Jennifer and Christopher disappear around the corner before replying. The truth. Millbrook's municipal library, with its red brick walls and arched windows, remained exactly as Anthony remembered it. After 3 days of discreetly observing Jennifer and Christopher's routine, he discovered that on Wednesdays, she still coordinated the children's reading program. Hidden among the bookshelves, Anthony watched as Jennifer led the session. Her soft voice echoed through the room as she read The Little Prince to a group of children sitting on colorful cushions. Christopher was among them, his green eyes sparkling with fascination with every page turned. "And what's the most important part of the book?" Jennifer asked the group. "What is invisible to the eye?" Christopher answered promptly, making Anthony's heart leap. "It's with the heart that you see straight." Jennifer smiled proudly, ruffling her son's hair. "Exactly, darling." After the session, while the other children left with their parents, Christopher remained, leafing through other books. Anthony took a deep breath and, gathering all his courage, approached the children's section. "That's an excellent book," he commented, pointing to the volume Christopher was holding, a story about dinosaurs. The boy looked up, curiosity evident on his face. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I loved them when I was your age," Anthony replied, his heart pounding wildly. "The Tyrannosaurus Rex was my favorite." "Mine too," Christopher exclaimed excitedly. "But Mom says the Triceratops was cooler because it was herbivorous and didn't hurt anyone." Jennifer appeared at that moment, her eyes widening at the sight of Anthony. "Chris, time to go," she called tensely. "But Mom, I was talking about dinosaurs with—" "Now Christopher." Her voice left no room for argument. The boy stood up reluctantly, returning the book to the shelf. "Bye, Mr. Dinosaur," he said, waving shyly before running to his mother. Jennifer waited until Christopher was busy putting away his belongings before approaching Anthony, her voice an angry whisper. "What do you think you're doing? We need to talk, Jennifer." "No, we don't. You lost that right a long time ago. Please," he begged, letting his guard down for the first time. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Something in his vulnerability must have touched Jennifer, because after a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Tomorrow, noon, at Café Mason, Chris will be at school." The next morning, Anthony arrived half an hour early at the cafe. He ordered a black coffee and mentally rehearsed everything he needed to say. Victoria had filled his inbox with worried messages, but he still couldn't find the right words to explain the situation. Jennifer arrived on time, wearing a simple floral dress and carrying a folder of documents. She sat in silence, her eyes avoiding meeting his. "I've brought something you need to see," she said, opening the folder and sliding some papers across the table. "Christopher's birth certificate. DNA tests aren't necessary. Just look at it." "Jen, don't call me that," she cut in. "I just want to make it clear, I'm not after your money. I don't need it. I've built a good life for Chris, and he's happy." Anthony examined the documents, his eyes lingering on his son's full name. Christopher Daniel Lawrence. His surname wasn't there. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked, his voice betraying the pain he felt. Jennifer laughed humorlessly. "You said you didn't want children, that you needed more than a small life in Millbrook, and then you disappeared, blocked all contact. How could I?" Her voice faltered, and Anthony saw tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "More than I can express." "Being sorry doesn't change the past," Jennifer replied, regaining her composure. "What do you want now, Anthony?" "I want to get to know my son. I want to be a part of his life." "What about your fiancé in Chicago? Your company? Your perfect life away from here?" Anthony hesitated. "I broke up with Victoria last night. On the phone, I know it wasn't the best way, but—" Jennifer stared at him in surprise. "What?" "I realize that I have different priorities now," he continued. "The company, I can run it from anywhere. I've already started looking for houses here in Millbrook. You can't just—" "I can and I will," he interrupted, his voice firm. "I've lost 5 years of my son's life. I won't lose another day." The silence that followed was heavy. Jennifer played nervously with her napkin, clearly processing the information. "He asked about you yesterday," she finally said. "About the Lord of the Dinosaurs. He said your eyes were just like his." Anthony felt his heart squeeze. "What did you say?" "That sometimes people have similar eyes," Jennifer sighed. "But I don't know how long I can keep that up. He's very smart, very observant." "Then let me be part of his life," Anthony pleaded. "We can go slowly, at your pace. But please, give me a chance." Jennifer studied him longingly before replying. "Tomorrow he has a baseball game after school, at 3. If you want to come along." Anthony nodded, feeling a surge of hope for the first time in days. It was a small step, but it was a start. When Jennifer got up to leave, he called her one last time. Jennifer, thank you." She paused for a moment, her back to him. "Don't make me regret this, Anthony. I can't see you getting hurt." As he watched her go, Anthony made a silent promise to himself and to his son. This time, he would do everything right. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifices, Christopher and Jennifer would be his priority. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant in Chicago. "Board meeting scheduled to discuss your extended absence. They require your immediate presence." Anthony deleted the message without hesitation. Some choices, after all, are easier than they seem. The baseball field at Millbrook Elementary School was buzzing with the energy of dozens of uniformed children and enthusiastic parents. Anthony, wearing jeans and a casual polo shirt, a conscious change from his usual Italian suit, stood discreetly in the far bleachers. Christopher, wearing number 7, warmed up with his teammates. Even from a distance, Anthony could see the determination on his son's face, the way he concentrated on each pitch, just as he himself did at the same age. "He's a starting pitcher," a familiar voice sounded next to him. Jennifer sat down, keeping a calculated distance. Best strike average in the minor leagues. The pride in her voice was evident, and Anthony felt a pang of regret for all the achievements he had missed out on. "How did he start playing?" he asked softly. Jennifer hesitated before answering. "It was his grandmother's idea, actually. Eleanor came to all the games. She said baseball was in the Maxwells' blood." The mention of her grandmother brought a fresh wave of guilt. How many games had she attended instead? How many stories about Christopher had she tried to share in the phone calls he never answered? The game began, and Anthony watched in fascination as his son mastered the pitcher's mound. His posture, his concentration, even the way he adjusted his cap, they were gestures that seemed to mirror his own childhood memories. "Strike!" shouted the umpire for the 3rd time, and Christopher celebrated quietly, as if trying to contain his joy. "He always does that," Jennifer commented, a soft smile on her lips. "He says he doesn't want the other boys to feel bad." "You've done an incredible job with him," Anthony murmured, his voice laced with emotion. Before Jennifer could reply, a buzz went through the stands. Victoria Winters, in her impeccable Chanel ensemble and high heels totally unsuitable for a baseball field, walked determinedly towards them. "Anthony Maxwell!" Her voice cut through the air like a razor. "3 days without returning my calls. A breakup over the phone, and now I find you watching baseball in a town in the middle of nowhere." The game practically stopped. All attention focused on the scene that was unfolding. Christopher, on the pitcher's mound, watched curiously. Jennifer stood up abruptly. "I'm going to get something to drink," she muttered, clearly uncomfortable. "No." Anthony held her gently by the wrist. Turning to Victoria, he spoke with a firmness that surprised everyone, including himself. "We need to talk, but not here. Not now." "Not here? Not now?" Victoria laughed incredulously. "You cancel our wedding over the phone and you think you can—" "Is that your son?" She interrupted her own speech, her eyes fixed on Christopher, who was still watching them from the field. The resemblance to Anthony was undeniable. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer instinctively stepped forward, as if to protect Christopher even from a distance. "Yes," Anthony replied simply. "He's my son." Victoria staggered as if she had been slapped. "How long did you know?" "I found out 4 days ago." "And you've already chosen?" Victoria's voice shook. "Have you chosen this small life over everything we've built?" "It's not a choice, Victoria," Anthony replied softly. "It's a course correction. Something I should have done a long time ago." Tears streamed down Victoria's perfectly made-up face. "You'll regret it, Anthony, when the novelty wears off, when you realize everything you're throwing away." "No," he interrupted her. "My only regret is that it took me so long to understand what really matters." Victoria looked one last time at Christopher, then at Jennifer, and finally at Anthony. Without saying another word, she turned on her heels and left, leaving only the echo of her heels in the tense silence. The game slowly resumed, but Christopher seemed to have lost some of his concentration. His next throw was a ball, something rare by his standards. "He realized," Jennifer whispered. "The similarity, the argument." "He's no fool, Anthony." As if to confirm her words, Christopher looked directly at them between pitches, his green eyes, the Maxwell's eyes, full of unformulated questions. "I need to tell him," Jennifer decided, her voice trembling slightly. Tonight. I can't let him find out from other people. Anthony felt his heart racing. Do you want me to? No. She cut him off. Let me do that. He needs to hear it from me first. Then we'll see. The rest of the game passed like a blur. Christopher recovered enough to secure victory for his team, but his celebration was restrained, his eyes constantly returning to the stands where Anthony was sitting. When the game was over, Jennifer stood up. I'll go and get him. Please don't try. Not today. He'll need time to process everything. Anthony nodded, his heart torn between the desire to run to his son and the realization that he needed to respect Christopher's time. Jennifer, he called as she walked away. Tell him I'm proud of him, of today's game, of who he is, of everything. She paused for a moment, and Anthony swore he saw tears in her eyes before she turned and continued on her way to their son. That night, alone in his grandmother's mansion, Anthony found a photo album that Eleanor kept hidden in her desk. Page after page of moments from Christopher's life, his first day at school, birthdays, baseball games, moments that his grandmother had treasured, waiting for the day when he would finally be ready to see them. I'm sorry, Grandma, he mumbled into the silence of the house, but I promise I'll fix everything. His phone rang. The office in Chicago again. This time, he didn't even bother to look at the message. Some priorities, after all, are crystal clear. The night after the baseball game dragged on like an eternity. Anthony stayed awake, imagining the conversation between Jennifer and Christopher, visualizing the expressions, the questions, the possible tears. When the sun finally rose, his phone vibrated with a message from Jennifer. He wants to meet you. Breakfast at Miller's Diner. Miller's Diner was an institution in Millbrook, the same place where he and Jennifer used to have milkshakes after school. Now, 15 years later, Anthony found himself sitting at one of the Formica tables, his hands shaking slightly as he waited. The doorbell rang and Christopher entered, holding Jennifer's hand tightly. His eyes, identical to his father's, were slightly red, a sign of a bad night's sleep. Good morning, Jennifer said softly, guiding Christopher to the table. The boy sat down facing Anthony, studying him with a surprising intensity for someone so young. The silence that followed was deafening. Are you really my father? Christopher finally asked, his voice small but firm. Anthony swallowed. Yes, I am. Why haven't you come to see me before? The question hit Anthony like a punch in the gut. Jennifer tensed visibly next to him, but remained silent. Because I made a very big mistake, Anthony answered honestly. I didn't know about you, but that's no excuse. You should have been here. Christopher frowned, processing the information. Grandma Eleanor used to talk about you sometimes. She said you built big buildings in Chicago. Yes, that's true. Anthony smiled sadly. Your grandmother, she was a very special woman. She came to all my games. Christopher continued. She said I played just like you when you were my age. The waitress approached, momentarily breaking the tension. Christopher ordered pancakes with chocolate syrup, exactly what Anthony used to order as a child. Mom says you're staying in Millbrook now, the boy commented, playing with his napkin. If you want, Anthony replied softly. I'd love to get to know you better, Christopher. To be a part of your life. Chris, the boy corrected. Everyone calls me Chris. Except when I'm in trouble, then Mom uses my full name. Jennifer laughed softly. The first display of relaxation of the morning. Breakfast progressed slowly, with Christopher asking occasional questions about Chicago, baseball, and Anthony's life. It was surprising how, even after years apart, they shared so many tastes and mannerisms. The moment was interrupted by Anthony's phone, another call from Chicago. This time it was Bernard Wilson, the chairman of the board. Sorry, Anthony mumbled, dismissing the call. Is this your work? Christopher asked curiously. Yes, but it's not important right now. Jennifer looked at him skeptically. Anthony, if you need to. No, he cut in firmly. This is more important. Just then, the phone rang again, and again, and again. Mr. Maxwell, the waitress approached with a landline. There's an urgent call for you from Maxwell Enterprises. Anthony sighed in frustration. Excuse me, he said, getting up. In the restaurant corridor, Bernard wasted no time on pleasantries. The board is meeting in an hour. We're losing the Miller contract because of your absence. Millions at stake. Maxwell, either you come back to Chicago today, or we start voting on your replacement. Anthony looked through the kitchen door. watching Christopher laugh at something Jennifer had said. His son, his family. Then vote, he replied simply, hanging up the phone. When he returned to the table, Christopher looked at him curiously. You look worried. It's nothing, Anthony smiled, sitting down again. Hey, how about we go to the baseball field after school today? We can practice some pitching. The boy's face lit up. Can I, Mom? Jennifer hesitated for a moment, her eyes meeting Anthony's. Of course, darling, but only until 6. You have homework. The rest of breakfast flowed more naturally. When it was time for Christopher to go to school, he surprised Anthony with a quick, shy hug before running out to the car. He's amazing, Anthony muttered, watching them drive off. His phone vibrated once again, a message from the council. Vote completed. Replacement approved. Your lawyers will be contacted. Anthony put the phone away, a serene smile on his face. The company he had taken years to build, the empire that meant so much. It all seemed insignificant compared to the hug he had just received. That afternoon, while teaching Christopher the secrets of perfect pitching, Anthony Maxwell finally understood what his grandmother had been trying to tell him all those years. Some fortunes can't be measured in dollars. Dad, Christopher called out, trying out the word for the first time. Can you teach me that pitch again? And at that moment, Anthony knew he had made the right choice. News of the fall of the Maxwell empire spread quickly through Millbrook. The local newspaper ran the headline, "Local magnate loses control of billion-dollar company," and whispers followed Anthony wherever he went. But none of that mattered when compared to afternoons on the baseball field with Christopher. 2 weeks had passed since breakfast at Miller's Diner, and a routine was beginning to establish itself. Anthony watched Christopher's games, helped with his math homework, his favorite subject, and gradually built a relationship with his son. On that particular morning, while organizing documents in his grandmother's office, Anthony found an old, carefully sealed box with his name written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. I thought I'd never find this, Rose commented from the doorway, carrying a tray of tea. Your grandmother prepared it in the last months of her life. Anthony opened the box carefully. Inside, he found letters, dozens of them, all addressed to him, but never sent. The first was dated 6 years ago. Dear Anthony, today I met your son. Jennifer was scared and alone, but Christopher is the most extraordinary child I've ever seen. He has your eyes, your smile, and that same determination that you have always shown, like your grandmother. I beg you, come home. There's so much you need to know. Tears began to blur her vision as she read letter after letter, each one detailing precious moments of Christopher's life that he had missed. Mr. Maxwell, Rachel, his former assistant, interrupted his thoughts. Bernard Wilson is here. Anthony straightened up, surprised. Bernard? The chairman of the board entered the office, his impeccable suit contrasting with the simplicity of the surroundings. We need to talk, Anthony. Rose discreetly left, closing the door behind her. If you've come to try and persuade me to come back, I've come to show you this, Bernard interrupted him, throwing a folder on the table. Your grandmother wasn't just a shareholder in Maxwell Enterprises. She was the largest single shareholder. Anthony picked up the documents. Confused. What are you talking about? Eleanor Maxwell kept her shares secret for years, through a series of shell companies. On her death, those shares passed to you. The board can't remove you. You're the majority owner of the company. The revelation struck Anthony like a thunderbolt. His grandmother, always so astute, had protected his future even when he ignored her. Why are you telling me this now? Bernard sighed, sitting down. Because Eleanor made me promise. She said that one day you would understand that there are more important things than business. And when that day came, I had to make sure that you didn't lose everything by making the right choice. At that moment, Jennifer appeared in the doorway, pale and agitated. Anthony, we need to talk. Now. Something in her voice made Anthony stand up immediately. Bernard, can we continue this later? In the back garden, Jennifer was pacing back and forth, clearly upset. Christopher found some old letters in the attic. Letters I wrote to you during your pregnancy. Anthony's heart sank. What did they say? The truth, Jennifer replied, her voice trembling. That I tried to tell you about the pregnancy. That I went to Chicago to find you. That what, Jennifer? That I saw you there, she burst out, tears streaming down her face. With Victoria. You looked so happy, so perfect together. I was 4 months in, using all the money I had to find you, And when I finally did, you were engaged to her. The memory hit Anthony like a slap. The engagement party on the terrace of the Drake Hotel, 5.5 years ago. He had just met Victoria. Why didn't you ever tell me that? Because you seem to have moved on, Jennifer shouted. Because I didn't want to be the small-town girl ruining your perfect life. Because you still loved me, Anthony added softly. The silence that followed was deafening. Christopher read the letters. Jennifer continued, wiping away her tears. He knows everything now. About how we met, how we fell in love, how we broke up, how I gave up telling you about him. Where is he? At the baseball field. He said he needed to think. Anthony didn't hesitate. I'll talk to him. Anthony, Jennifer called out to him as he headed for the car. He found this too. She held out a small velvet box. Inside was the engagement ring he had bought for her 15 years ago, the week before their big fight. You kept it. Some things are hard to let go of, she muttered. At the baseball field, Christopher was sitting alone in the stands, a pile of yellowed cards next to him. Can I sit down? Anthony asked softly. The boy shrugged, but moved to make room. Did you love Mom? Christopher asked after a long silence. More than anything, Anthony answered honestly. And now? Anthony looked at his son, so young and already so perceptive. Now I understand that some loves never really go away. They just wait for the right moment to come back. Christopher picked up one of the letters. Mom wrote that you were the love of her life, that she hoped I had your smile and your heart. And you do. Anthony smiled sadly. You've got the best of both of us. Are you leaving again? Never, Anthony replied firmly. Not if every building in Chicago depends on it. Christopher leaned over, resting his head on his father's shoulder. Promise. I promise, Anthony whispered, hugging his son. Some choices, once made, are forever. As the sun set over the baseball field, father and son sat in silence, the letters between them telling a story of love, loss, and redemption that was just beginning its next chapter. The revelation of the letters changed everything. The days that followed brought a new dynamic between Anthony, Jennifer, and Christopher, as if a veil of secrets had finally been removed. It was a Saturday morning when Anthony decided to take the next step towards rebuilding. How about a picnic? He suggested over breakfast at Jennifer's house, something that had become a weekend ritual. At Lake Monroe, like in the old days, Jennifer stopped serving pancakes, her hands shaking slightly. Lake Monroe had been their place, where they had their first kiss, where they planned their future, where he intended to ask for her hand in marriage before everything fell apart. Please, Mom, Christopher begged, his eyes shining with anticipation. Can we go fishing too? Jennifer looked at Anthony, who maintained a hopeful expression. All right, he finally gave in. But you two are going to prepare everything. The morning went by in a lively rush. Christopher helped Anthony prepare the sandwiches while Jennifer organized a basket of fruit and drinks. The domesticity of the scene did not go unnoticed by any of the adults. At the lake, while Christopher tested out his new fishing rod, a gift from Anthony, Jennifer sat next to her ex-boyfriend on the plaid blanket. It reminds me of that summer, she commented softly. Before I ruined everything, Anthony added. We both made mistakes. Jennifer sighed. I should have fought harder. I should have insisted on telling you about Chris. Anthony took something out of his pocket, the small velvet box that Jennifer had shown him a few days earlier. Did you know I was going to propose here? That last week, before our fight, Jennifer held her breath. Anthony. No, he interrupted her gently. I need to say this. I had everything planned. The sunset, the flowers. I even convinced old Pete to play our song on the guitar. But then came that proposal from Chicago, and I lost my way. Dad, Christopher shouted excitedly. I got one. The two adults watched as the boy struggled with his first catch, his face a mixture of concentration and joy that reminded them so much of Anthony as a child. He's amazing, Anthony muttered. How could I have wasted so much time? We're here now, Jennifer replied softly. That's what matters. The day passed like a dream. Christopher alternated between fishing with Anthony and joining them on the blanket for a snack, telling stories and asking questions about what his parents were like when they were young. So you met here? He asked, biting into a sandwich. Your mother was reading The Little Prince under that oak tree. Anthony pointed to an ancient tree on the shore of the lake. I was trying to impress her with my fishing skills and ended up falling into the water. Jennifer laughed at the memory. He emerged all soaked but still trying to look charming. Did it work? Christopher asked curiously. More or less, Jennifer smiled. At least I got a date for hot chocolate. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Christopher fell asleep on the blanket, exhausted after a day of adventures. He seemed so at peace, Jennifer commented, smoothing a lock of her son's hair. Anthony took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Jen, I know that maybe it's too soon, that there's a lot to rebuild, but he opened the velvet box, revealing the ring. I'm not asking for anything now. I just want you to know that I've never stopped loving you. And if one day, Anthony, Jennifer interrupted him, tears shining in her eyes. There's so much between us, so much history, so much pain, and so much love, he added. Look at him, Jen. Look at our family. Can we have this chance again? Before Jennifer could answer, Christopher stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about flying fish. The two of them laughed softly, the moment of tension broken by their son's innocence. One day at a time, Jennifer finally replied, her hand finding Anthony's on the blanket. Let's rebuild this, right? For our family. Anthony nodded, putting the ring away but keeping their hands entwined. The sun continued its downward path over Lake Monroe, a silent witness to yet another chapter in their story. On the way back, Christopher woke up briefly in the back seat of the car. It was the best day ever, he mumbled sleepily. Jennifer and Anthony exchanged a glance through the rearview mirror, a silent understanding passing between them. Some bridges, once rebuilt, become stronger than they were originally. That evening, after leaving Jennifer and Christopher at home, Anthony drove to his grandmother's mansion. In the study, he found yet another letter from Eleanor, as if she knew exactly what was going to happen. Dear Anthony, true love is patient. It waits, forgives, and rebuilds. By the time you read this, I hope you will have understood that some fortunes cannot be measured in dollars, and that the best investments are those we make as a family. Love, Grandma Eleanor. Anthony fell asleep with the letter on his chest, dreaming of future picnics, baseball games, and a family that was finally complete. Autumn arrived in Millbrook, bringing with it an explosion of color and change. The trees on the Maxwell estate were painted in shades of red and gold, while inside the mansion, Anthony was facing his own transformation. Sitting in his grandmother's study, he was analyzing the latest proposal from the Maxwell Enterprises board, an offer to buy his shares for an astronomical sum, on the condition that he completely relinquished control of the company. The documents just need your signature, Bernard explained via video chat. It's a generous offer, Anthony. More money than you could spend in several lifetimes. Anthony swiveled his chair to the window, watching Christopher play in the garden with his new dog, a golden retriever that Jennifer had finally allowed after weeks of joint pleading from father and son. What if I don't want to sell? He asked, his mind already formulating a different plan. Bernard sighed. Then you'll need to actively take over the presidency. The board will no longer accept an absent CEO. What if I could run it from Millbrook, a company the size of Maxwell Enterprises, run from a small town? Bernard laughed humorlessly. The council would never go for it. The board has no choice, Anthony replied firmly. I'm the majority shareholder, remember? At that moment, Jennifer appeared in the office doorway, carrying an old box. Her face was pale. Bernard, I need to call you back. Anthony quickly ended the video conference. Jennifer, what happened? She put the box on the table, another of Eleanor's treasured possessions. I found this in the attic. I think you need to see it. Inside the box were old documents, yellowed photos, and a diary. The photos showed Anthony's father, Richard Maxwell, as a young man, next to a man Anthony recognized as Jennifer's father. Our parents were partners, Jennifer explained, her voice trembling slightly. Before the accident, before your father died, they were building something together. Maxwell Enterprises didn't start in Chicago, Anthony. It started here, in Millbrook. Anthony flipped through his father's diary, discovering a story he had never known. Maxwell Enterprises had been born as a small construction business, founded by Richard Maxwell and Daniel Lawrence Sr. When Richard died in a car accident, Jennifer's father was forced to sell his share for a pittance to pay off medical debts. My God, Anthony muttered, the pieces falling into place. That's why your family always resented us so much. That's why your father, That's why my father never approved of our relationship, Jennifer added. He believed that the Maxwells had stolen our family's future. Christopher chose that moment to rush into the office, his dog at his heels. Dad, Mom, look what Max has learned to do. The two adults watched as the boy proudly demonstrated how he had taught the dog to paw, their worries momentarily forgotten in the face of their son's joy. After Christopher left, Anthony made up his mind. I'm going to fix this, he declared. Anthony, it's not necessary. Yes, it is, he interrupted her gently. Not just for the past, but for the future, for our future. Over the next few weeks, Anthony worked tirelessly on a new plan for Maxwell Enterprises. He transformed his grandmother's office into an operations center, installing state-of-the-art technology that allowed video conferences with offices around the world. But his real masterpiece was the project he presented to the board, the construction of a new technology center in Millbrook, which would be the company's new headquarters. Going back to our roots, he explained during the presentation. But with an eye to the future, the most significant part of the project, however, was revealed at a dinner at the Lawrence home. I want to offer equal partnership in the company, Anthony announced to Jennifer and her father, not as charity or compensation, but as recognition of what it should always have been. Old Daniel Lawrence Sr. looked longingly at the man he had once despised. Why? Because some debts need to be paid, Anthony replied, and because I want my son to grow up knowing that we did the right thing. Christopher, who played with Max in the yard, had no idea of the monumental changes taking place inside the house. But when his grandfather Lawrence hugged him later that night, tears in the old man's eyes, he sensed that something important had happened. That night, after putting Christopher to bed, Jennifer found Anthony on the balcony. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did, he replied, pulling her close. For us, for our family. The engagement ring was still in his desk drawer, waiting for the right moment. But there, under the stars of Millbrook, with the sound of his son's breathing coming through the open window, Anthony Maxwell finally understood the true meaning of legacy. It wasn't about corporate empires or bank accounts. It was about doing the right thing, even if it was late. It was about building something his son could be proud of one day. $1 for your thoughts, Jennifer murmured, resting her head on his shoulder. I'm thinking, he replied with a smile, that some fortunes are built on love, not money. And for the first time in a long time, the weight of the Maxwell legacy didn't seem so heavy to carry. Winter came to Millbrook with unexpected ferocity. A snowstorm was approaching the town, and with it came winds of change that no one could have predicted. Anthony was in the middle of a crucial video conference about the company's transition when his phone vibrated with an urgent message from Jennifer. Chris has a high fever. Hospital. Come quickly. Without hesitation, he ended the meeting and ran to his car, ignoring the snow that was beginning to fall. At the hospital, he found Jennifer in the emergency room, her face marked by concern. Pneumonia, she explained, her voice shaking. He was playing in the snow yesterday and Mr. and Mrs. Maxwell, a nurse called out, making Jennifer blush and Anthony feel a tightness in his chest at the title that wasn't yet official. Lawrence, Jennifer corrected softly. I'm Mrs. Lawrence. The doctor explained that Christopher would need to be hospitalized. The pneumonia was severe and he needed intensive care. As they watched their son sleep, connected to monitors and oxygen tubes, Anthony felt a fear he had never experienced before. He'll be fine, Jennifer murmured, more to herself than to him. He has to be. The storm worsened during the night, isolating Millbrook from the rest of the world. The hospital ran on generators and the roads were impassable. That's when the doctor brought more worrying news. Christopher needs a specific medication, he explained. But with the storm, our stock is running low. Where can we find more? Anthony asked immediately. The Central Hospital in Hartford has it. But with these conditions, I'll go, Anthony declared, already reaching for his keys. Anthony, no, Jennifer grabbed his arm. It's suicide to drive in the storm. He's our son, he replied simply. The look they exchanged said it all. Years of hurt and resentment dissolved in that moment, replaced by something deeper, more fundamental. Then I'll go with you, Jennifer decided. No, Anthony touched her cheek gently. Chris needs you here. I promise I'll be back. Before leaving, Anthony stopped by his son's room. Christopher was sleeping restlessly, his breathing difficult even with the help of oxygen. Dad? He mumbled sleepily. his green eyes clouded with fever. "I'm here, champ." Anthony held his small hand. "I'll get your medicine, okay? Be strong." "Like a Maxwell?" Christopher asked with a small smile. "Like a Maxwell Lawrence," Anthony corrected, kissing his warm forehead. The drive to Hartford was a nightmare. The snow made visibility almost zero, and several times Anthony almost lost control of the car, but the image of his sick son kept him going. At the Hartford hospital, after what seemed like an eternity, Anthony finally got the medicine. The return journey, however, proved even more challenging. A fallen tree was blocking the main road. With no alternative, he had to take a detour via the old mountain road, the same one where his father had suffered the fatal accident years ago. That's when it happened. A deer came out of nowhere, causing Anthony to swerve sharply. The car skidded on the snow, spinning dangerously close to the precipice. For a terrible moment, he thought that history would repeat itself, but something, perhaps his father's spirit, perhaps love for his son, made him keep control. The car stopped inches from the abyss. When he finally arrived at Millbrook Hospital, hours had passed. Jennifer was waiting for him in the lobby, tears frozen on her face. "Thank God," she whispered, hugging him tightly. I thought I'd lost you too." "Never again," Anthony promised, handing the medicine to the doctors. The next few hours were an agonizing wait, but gradually Christopher began to respond to the treatment. His fever went down and his breathing improved. The next morning, when the sun finally broke through the clouds, Anthony watched his son sleep peacefully, Jennifer asleep in the chair next to him. It was then that he realized he had faced his greatest fear that night. It wasn't the storm, or even the road that had taken his father away. It was the fear of losing his family again. He took his engagement ring out of his pocket. He'd been carrying it constantly since the day at the lake. This time, there was no doubt, no hesitation. When Jennifer woke up, she found the ring on her finger and Anthony kneeling beside her. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not because we have to, not because it's right, but because I want to spend every storm of my life by your side." Christopher chose that moment to open his eyes, smiling faintly as he saw the scene. "It's about time," he muttered, making his parents laugh through their tears. The storm had passed, leaving behind not only a snow-covered town, but also a stronger family, more united than ever. "Yes," Jennifer finally answered, kissing Anthony as Christopher applauded faintly. 1,000 times yes. Spring arrived in Millbrook, bringing with it not only the blossoming of flowers, but also a wave of change. Maxwell Lawrence Technologies, as the company was now called, was starting to build its new headquarters in the center of town, transforming a derelict site into a symbol of renewal. Jennifer and Anthony had decided on a simple wedding in June at Lake Monroe, but before that, there was an even more important ceremony to perform. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Jennifer asked, adjusting Christopher's tie. They were in the county courthouse, waiting for the adoption hearing. After months of legal proceedings, Anthony could finally make official what his heart already knew. Christopher was his son. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," Anthony replied, watching Christopher practice his signature on a piece of paper. The boy had insisted on signing his new full name, Christopher Daniel Maxwell Lawrence. Judge Thompson, a gray-haired lady who had known Jennifer since she was a child, conducted the ceremony with a warm smile. "Christopher," she addressed the boy, "do you understand what this adoption means?" "It means that I officially have a father," Christopher replied with a seriousness beyond his years. "But actually, he was my father a long time ago." The simplicity and depth of the answer moved everyone in the room. Anthony held Jennifer's hand, feeling the engagement ring on her finger. After the ceremony, they went to celebrate at Miller's Diner. Christopher was savoring his chocolate milkshake when he asked the question that took everyone by surprise. "Can I have a baby brother now?" Jennifer choked on her coffee, while Anthony tried to hide a smile. "One step at a time, champ," he replied, exchanging a meaningful glance with his fiancée. Later that day, while Christopher was showing his new documents to Grandpa Lawrence, Anthony took Jennifer for a walk. They stopped in front of a Victorian house on Maple Street, the same one Jennifer had always admired when they were teenagers. "What do you think?" he asked, handing her a set of keys. Jennifer looked from the house to the keys, her eyes widening. "Anthony, you didn't—" "I thought we needed a place of our own," he explained. "A place for our family to grow up." The tears in Jennifer's eyes said everything that words could not express. "And there's one more thing," Anthony continued, guiding her to the backyard. There, partially built, was a treehouse. Chris and I started building it at the weekend, he explained. He said that every family yard needs one. Jennifer looked at the details of the project. The small windows, the rope ladder, the perfect space for children's adventures. You're building more than a treehouse, she commented softly. You're building memories. We are, Anthony corrected, hugging her from behind. We're building everything together now. The sound of laughter interrupted the moment. Christopher came running down the street, followed by his grandfather Lawrence, who was carrying building plans. Dad, Grandpa's come up with an amazing idea for the treehouse, Christopher exclaimed excitedly. We can make a pulley system to lift things up. Daniel Lawrence Sr., who had gradually accepted Anthony as part of the family, held out the drawings. I thought we could work on it together, he offered. After all, building things has always been a tradition in our families. Anthony felt the weight of those words. It wasn't just about a treehouse. It was about healing old wounds, building bridges between past and future. It would be an honor, he replied, extending his hand to his future father-in-law. While the men discussed the details of the project, Jennifer watched the scene with a full heart. Christopher, sitting on the makeshift swing that Anthony had hung, was drawing his own plans for the treehouse. Mom, he called, can we paint it blue? It's Dad's favorite color. Of course, darling, Jennifer replied, amazed at how naturally her son had embraced all the changes. In the evening, after a family dinner in the new house, Christopher fell asleep on the unpacked sofa, exhausted from planning improvements to his future treehouse. He looks so happy, Jennifer commented, covering him with a blanket. We all are, Anthony replied, pulling her into his arms. You know, I spent years building skyscrapers in Chicago, but I've never felt as fulfilled as I do today, building a simple treehouse with our son. Jennifer smiled, understanding perfectly, because sometimes the most important foundations aren't made of concrete and steel, but of love, forgiveness, and second chances. And there, in that Victorian house on Maple Street, with her son sleeping peacefully and her future husband by her side, Jennifer knew that they had finally found their true home. The morning of the wedding dawned perfect in Millbrook. Lake Monroe reflected the blue June sky like a mirror, and a gentle breeze swayed the wildflowers that decorated the ceremony site. At the Maxwell Mansion, where Jennifer was getting ready, the atmosphere was one of joyful excitement. Rose, the housekeeper, was helping with the last details of the dress, a vintage model that had belonged to Jennifer's mother. Something old, Rose smiled, adjusting the veil. Your mother would be so proud. Christopher rushed into the room, already dressed in his pageboy suit, carrying a small blue box. Something blue, he announced proudly, handing his mother a delicate bracelet. Dad and I chose it together. Jennifer hugged her son, taking care not to wrinkle his dress. You look very elegant, my love, like a real Maxwell Lawrence, he replied with a smile, making everyone laugh. At the lake, Anthony waited nervously under the ancient oak tree where it all began. The place had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with lanterns hanging from the branches and paths marked with white petals. Bernard Wilson, now a close friend, was adjusting his tie. Nervous? For the first time in my life, Anthony admitted, I'm exactly where I should be. Music began to play, not a traditional wedding march, but La Vie en Rose on the guitar, played by Old Pete, just as Anthony had planned years ago in his first unfulfilled marriage proposal. Christopher came first, carrying the rings with comic seriousness. Then everyone stood up when Jennifer appeared, led by her father. Anthony felt his heart stop. Jennifer looked stunning, but it wasn't just her physical beauty that thrilled him. It was everything she represented. His first love, the mother of his son, his second chance. When Daniel Sr. handed Anthony his daughter's hand, there were tears in his eyes. Take care of my treasure, he murmured. With my life, Anthony promised. The ceremony was conducted by Judge Thompson, who had presided over Christopher's adoption. In a particularly touching moment, she asked the boy to join his parents. Today we celebrate not just the union of two people, the judge declared, but the officialization of a family that love had already built. Christopher held his parents' hands as they exchanged vows. Jennifer, Anthony began, his voice breaking, I spent years building an empire, without realizing that my true treasure was here. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could ever receive, our son, and now you're giving me a second chance to make it right. I promise to spend the rest of my life deserving this love. Jennifer wiped away a tear before beginning her vows. Anthony, they say we can't rewrite the past, but we can choose how our story continues. I choose you, today and always, to write each new chapter together. When it came time for the rings, Christopher presented them with a beaming smile. Something new, he announced, making everyone laugh again. After the I-do's, the party continued into the afternoon in the garden of the Maxwell mansion. Daniel Sr. surprised everyone with an emotional speech. When Eleanor Maxwell came to me years ago, talking about intertwined destinies and second chances, I confess I doubted it. But she was right. Some stories need time to find their true ending. During the bride and groom's first dance, to the sound of La Vie en Rose, Christopher joined them on the dance floor, turning the waltz into a family hug. "Look," someone shouted, pointing to the sky. A double rainbow had formed over the lake, like a natural blessing for the occasion. Grandma Eleanor used to say that double rainbows are a sign of promises kept, Christopher commented, hugging his parents. Later, as the sun began to set, Jennifer found Anthony sitting on the old garden swing, watching Christopher play with the other children. "$1 for your thoughts?" She smiled, taking a seat next to him. "I was thinking about how funny life is," he replied, pulling her close. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters." "And what really matters?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "This," he replied simply, gesturing to Christopher, to her, to their reunited family. "It's always been that." Night fell over Millbrook, the lanterns in the garden creating a magical setting. Christopher fell asleep in Grandpa Lawrence's arms, exhausted but happy. Jennifer and Anthony were once again dancing under the stars, now as husband and wife, when she whispered in his ear, "I have something to tell you." "What?" he asked, noticing the special sparkle in her eyes. "It looks like Christopher's wish for a little brother is going to come true sooner than we thought." Anthony stopped dancing, his eyes widening. "Are you?" Jennifer nodded, smiling through her tears of happiness. And there, under the starry Millbrook sky, with his son sleeping peacefully and his wife carrying on a new life, Anthony Maxwell finally understood the true meaning of success. It wasn't the skyscrapers in Chicago or the bank accounts. It was the love that built his family's story, brick by brick. If you had to choose between the professional success of your dreams in a big city or a seemingly simpler life with the ones you love in your hometown, which path would you choose and why? Your participation is very important to the channel. Leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.